Ready to go, yeah.
Right.
Do you want to roll with the intro?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Okay. Feels really weird now. I haven't done this in forever.
And 3, 2, 1.
Hi everybody. So welcome back to Wandering into Wellness, and we are here in the Milltown Physiotherapy Clinic, which is exciting. Last time I was here, I was lying on my back with not many clothes on. And we will get into why that is later. But here we have with us Elaine, and Elaine is one of the... Are you a pelvic floor physio, or would you say you're a women's health physio who specialises in pelvic floor? How would you say?
I'm probably a physio first and foremost, and then I specialise in women's health, but I also do men's health. So we come under the bracket of a pelvic health physiotherapist.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
But I do have a specific interest in women's health. Yeah.
It seems like the women's pelvis is where it's at.
Yes.
It's like male pelvis doesn't have the same, I don't know, in terms of when we're talking about birth, all these sorts of things,
Yeah.
like the change and stuff that's required to go on there. Like I remember we just put out our latest podcast with Ashton Jackson. We were talking about, or Lydia mentioned that thing, how the pelvis literally kind of softens and almost splits open, and then the tailbone kind of flicks back. All these things that a male pelvis will just never know about.
Yeah. Like
from a birth point of view. So it's an amazing structure. It's an amazing thing. Like I think I just love to understand more about like how is it? I think we both come to understand what fascia means. We talk about it a lot on our other podcasts, and like the relationship between parts of our body and other parts of our body. But the pelvis is just such a complex and kind of dynamic part of us.
Yeah.
I just love to understand more about why is it such a relevant part to women's health, particularly, I suppose.
Well, the pelvis itself is a bony structure with loads of ligaments, and it's influenced by hormones, and because it houses our organs for reproduction and urination, it's responsible for our sexual health. It's got just a huge amount of functions, and those hormones can loosen it and ask it to do more and stretch it, and it's so adaptable, and malleable would be the word.
And is it the only kind of bit of our body where we have that hormone relationship, where the hormone kind of plays with places of organ?
So when we are pregnant, particularly, the hormone relaxin influences ligaments all over our body, actually.
Okay.
And that's, I suppose, it's non-specific in its action. So yeah, when you're pregnant, I don't know how you find your pregnant clients, though. Are they more stretchy generally and that when they're... Yeah?
It's not, because you might not have known them previous to being pregnant.
Of course
you wouldn't
not.
necessarily notice.
Yeah.
And obviously the relaxin comes in later in the pregnancy,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't necessarily notice the difference. But what you would be continually saying to them is, in pregnancy, go to about 70% of your capacity for stretch, rather than reaching for your end point, because it's so easy to overstretch and then end up with damage there afterwards, for sure.
So also, it's an amazing structure. I think with regard to yoga, it's got a hugely spiritual element to it. And it's the opening and the exit to life, really, isn't it?
Really interesting, that
so
relationship.
it deserves care that we maybe don't always give it, it's supporting us day in, day out, when we're moving, when we're sitting, when we're jumping, when we're trying to do kind of heavy loaded exercise, as well as having the fundamental structural relationship to childbirth and everything.
And it's such a complex. It's not called a joint structure, is it? Is it known as a joint? Is it because it has all these components that are all joints, I suppose.
The sacroiliac joint is on either side, and they're joints, and the jury is out really on how much it moves and how relevant that is. There would be schools of thought within physio that say this doesn't need treatment, it doesn't move, your problems will be coming from other places. And then there's a whole other school of, that say, gosh, huge amounts of pain can come from here, especially osteopathy style approaches would say that there is enough movement here to cause pain. And we know that it becomes more mobile during pregnancy and with delivery. But yeah, it's a bony structure first and foremost. It's got the ilia on either side, which sit neatly into your structure here on either side, your sacrum, and then attaches up into your lumbar spine. And then your coccyx then at the bottom, which is like the tail, our old tail, I suppose, that we used to have, when we were apes,
Yeah.
and that's there as a structure for us to sit on, and then of course, like you said, movement during delivery. And then our pelvic floor itself sits in underneath.
This is amazing, because I've never seen this model before.
Oh, okay. If I can get it in there properly. So that sits underneath like, they say it's a hammock, but this is a lovely kind of angle to look at it from, because you can see that it's a dome-shaped structure, and it mirrors our diaphragm up here, which is like a dome like structure within our rib cage. And those two structures work very much hand in hand, very much like a coffee plunger effect. So when we inhale and our belly expands, our pelvic floor descends, our diaphragm. Well, that's what's meant to happen, but not in all cases are we doing that.
And so how much movement is there in that internal pelvic floor? Are you talking about like it actually ballooning upwards and downwards, or is it always a
ballooning? Is probably a strong word. Because I would have the privilege, I suppose, of feeling many pelvic floors internally as women breathe in and out. It's a very subtle feeling, but there is definite movement there. I do refer to it as the flower opening, because it is as subtle as that. It's as subtle as little flower, like petals just opening. But there is definite movement there, and you can feel when the structure, it's like putting your hands on any muscle, because it is. It's just it's muscle spanning out on all sides of the pelvis, deep into the corners where your bum muscles sit, and it attaches straight out into here. So, a muscle, it's made up of sarcomeres, we know from looking at them under a microscope, that are pretty much like this, and an accordion style. They move in and out, and that's exactly what you feel with the pelvic floor too, like any other muscle, like your calf muscle or your biceps. It doesn't have the same range, as here to here, but it has enough range to work in those minute little areas, like the entrance of your bladder, and be able to react to close it off when you need it, be able to open and relax and when you need it. It also plays a huge function in supporting your back passes, so your rectum. So in another diagram that you might see online, you can see the rectum comes down and it has an angle, it's nearly a right angle. It's quite, and the muscle loops around that. And that's our pubirectalis muscle that attaches kind of from the back and through. And so it supports our rectum. And in order to be able to let go of feces, our muscles need to be able to relax there. And similarly, then there's a tonic, this kind of low level contraction of our muscles there that help to keep things in. And so if there's disruption to any of that, then we may have issues with that.
And so when we're like told to like put our knees up above our pelvis to completely eliminate, is that a relationship to the pelvic floor, or is it like what part of it?
It's to open up our hips mainly, so you're taking your pelvis into a better angle and opening up the hips, but also that's going to affect your pelvic floor and allow you to relax into things better, because generally our sitting postures, they don't always, like this right angle sitting thing that we do a lot of the time, or a slouched sit, it tends to shorten our pelvic floor. And actually, when we look at Eastern cultures, they are said to have more of an attachment, or whereas our better functioning pelvic floors, because they squat more and they change their positions more. And there would be, again, some experts in the field would say that we need to work our pelvic floors more indirectly by moving differently, because we're often having detrimental, like constipation is such a big issue for us now in the Western world. But a lot of it, as well as being diet related, it's down to not moving enough and not allowing our pelvic floor to actually move, and it gets stuck then, and it just can't move outside of that.
That range. And so you obviously have that like tonality thing, but there's a balance, right? Because then I'm sure you see people who are like athletes or overtraining, or probably coming into pregnancy with a lot of tone, or maybe hypertone in that tissue. And like there would be absolutely, like, there would be evidence there to say that those that, for instance, horse riders, gymnasts,
those that swam a lot as children, even as teenagers, seem to have this underlying predisposition actually to pelvic girdle pain, but also in our assessment, you know, if you know that somebody has these histories or is a yoga or Pilates instructor, you're anticipating, unless they have a huge awareness of how to release their pelvic floor and they've been doing work on that, you're most likely anticipating a level of pelvic floor that is relatively on the tighter scale. And that maybe, but you know what, I have to say, Finn, like, I think it's not talked about how tight pelvic floors are across the board. Like, I think, you know, we try to put it into this, it's this person or it's that person. But in actual fact, probably everybody, there'll be a smaller minority of people that come into me that and they think that they're going to have these really loose, flaccid pelvic floors, particularly after they've had a child. But that's not what we find. And, you know, I think there's a number of reasons there. I think stress has a huge impact on our lives, and we're holding it inside, and we're holding our pelvic floors tightly around the anus a lot of the time. You know, that even that you know, that word, somebody's anal, like, you know, well it shows, you know. And I think more and more people are living a life from a really hyper place. And it is showing up. And they're holding tension inside that they aren't even aware of, you know. But it crops up then because they get an issue, or after childbirth maybe they're not recovering like they thought they would, or they might be getting pain, and then that, you know, leads us to that place to having a look there and trying to release that. So I think, you know, it's a bigger issue than it's definitely a bigger issue than is documented. It's a very hard one to assess, and you know, because the ethics around it, I guess, it's not, you know, and it really has been brought to the fore more and more by my boss Maeve here. I mean, she has really pioneered an approach that is related to releasing the pelvic floor, as opposed to always thinking about tightening, you know.
Can we just go back to talking just specifically for people who don't know, like, what are the functions? What would be the main functions of the pelvic floor, just in, like, if you had to choose 4 of them?
Well, your main functions are urination and fecal incontinence. You know, so keeping things in where they're meant to keep, in your bladder and in the rectum, and being able to move and do all the things that you want to be able to do, and that's your pelvic floor. Your levator anal muscles are helping with that. It's got a huge role in sexual and reproductive health, so being able to support your baby, childbirth. And in sexual health, then being able to be sexually healthy and happy, and it supports all our organs within our torso, you know, within our abdomen.
I think that's never talked about. That part of it is like it being in relation to all the stomach muscles. It's like, you know, there's the square or the rectangle, and that is the bottom floor of it, right?
So it's part of our breathing apparatus, really, you know. And they say also it has a role as nearly a sump pump to kind of help with fluid balance and drainage within the body, because it's got this kind of, you know, slow lying kind of tonic activity.
And do you work from that point of view on, like, blood reversals or that sort of thing? Does that relieve pressure on?
No, there's probably roles there for, you know, lymphatic drainage and using that, but that would definitely be a smaller role there. Once you can get a muscle working and doing its action, your body's going to take that and do it anyway. You know, so I mean, you can use different positions like legs up the wall and things like that, which will ultimately be helping improve blood flow to the region. And that may help to have your pelvic floor work more effectively. But I don't think that would be our main approach as physios. But yeah, it's certainly the ultimate goal is to have your pelvic floor working to its you know, its with its main function and role to its best. To its best. Yeah.
So can you speak then to the pregnancy aspect and like what are its roles when it comes to that later stage of pregnancy and how
so again, you know, the pelvic floor stretches a huge amount in concurrence with our rib cage spreading wide and our pelvis widening to allow our baby to grow into our pelvis. Your pelvic floor, it grows to, you know, it stretches a huge amount. With that, it's just trying to support that growing baby, and coming into childbirth, then its role is to be able to stretch and allow your baby to descend further into the pelvis as part of the uterus contracting and relaxing. And I suppose our role as physios, in conjunction with great people like yourself who are working in the community with women, you know, is to educate women about how their pelvic floor can be used as not an opposition to delivery, that you can set it up to have it work with you, as opposed to this barrier that needs to be kind of fought through. I think, you know, when it comes to childbirth, your pelvic floor, no more than what your uterus and your body is doing, there is a huge fundamentally natural thing that's going on there. But I think Western medical interventions don't always help us to use those natural methods. What do you think, Lydia?
Yeah, 100%. And I think even, you know, within the yoga classes and Pilates classes and all the stuff that's going on, historically, like you said, the focus has been on, we need to tighten. It's just like everyone's going, make that pelvic floor tighter, make it stronger. And like you said, I mean, my experience of people and of myself has always been that actually there's too much tone there, as opposed to that we're walking around with these flaccid things that we need to tighten. And there's so many classes that you go to, and any pregnant woman that you talk to will go, and you say, oh, you know, have you been addressing the pelvic floor in any way? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm doing the pelvic floor lifts, or I'm doing my squeezes. But there's no mention of release. In my classes, I'm just endlessly boring mums talking about releases.
And the pelvic floor squeezes, are those to assist with contractions? Is that the traditional thought?
No, it's because they're thinking that postnatally, you know, if you have nice tone in your pelvic floor, you're going to get better blood flow there. That means you're going to heal better. You're less likely to tear, and if you do tear, you're more likely. This is the idea, the notion that's out there.
There's a good bit of research there to say that if you do your pelvic floor exercises, and I think that's what needs to stress, it's an exercise. It's not just the squeeze or the Kegel, because people do have this in their head that it's the lift, that they need to get stronger, to reduce the incidence of incontinence afterwards, because research in its narrow tunnel of vision has been able to link doing your pelvic floor exercises with reduced incidence of incontinence if you started during pregnancy. And then leading on to afterwards, if you're, you know, good at doing them regularly afterwards in an effective manner, you'll improve incontinence if you have some, or you'll prevent it. You're thinking about future-proofing later down the line. But like you said, it's about how you do it, because if you go hell for leather and you end up with this pelvic floor that's up at the roof because you've tightened it so much, and actually what I find with women, and I don't know if it's a surrender thing with women too, the further we get into pregnancy, especially in our first pregnancy, we're like so up to 90, am I doing it all right, and I've got everything done, and I've got all the, that's manifesting in our body. And so if I assess a pelvic floor 34 weeks to do perineal massage on a woman, more often than not I'm finding a tight pelvic floor, because, and you teach this a lot, it's to be able to surrender, to imagine that opening of to not think, God, I have to keep squeezing here to keep it all in, to keep my baby supported. And I think a lot of it is in our language that we give women too. It's balance, isn't it? You know, it's about balancing. But also from that later stage in pregnancy, maybe stepping down the strengthening aspect, that lift quite as much, but to have that balance of the huge amount of being able to surrender and release, because it's such a huge part of childbirth. Because if you can't surrender and release and you're heightening tension, it could lead to, you know, more resistance.
And it makes sense. I mean, like it like that muscle is largely blocking the way if it decides to be. It's the only thing there. Like,
you know, and I think fear has a big contribution as well, though. You know, because I was listening to an audiobook recently. They're the 4th trimester, and it's just a lovely book, because you're looking at the mental preparation of childbirth is huge, but mentally that's manifesting in your body. So if you're mentally in a really strong place going into childbirth, it influences how you are down here, because we know that when we're breathing deeply, diaphragmatically, we are influencing our parasympathetic nervous system, and that's where it's at. You know, it's about relaxing your body into childbirth, being able to deal with the fears, building your resilience. But ultimately, that has the influence on the pelvic floor too. So I'd love to see physiotherapists, because we're very much, people associate us with the physical, the physical. But you cannot separate them.
No,
you know,
we're learning more and more. It's like Western medicine only accepts like heart attacks equals stress. That's the only time that we make that connection.
Yeah, but
like every other thing, it's like IBS is only being like, they're beginning to think, oh, maybe
light bulb moment.
Oh my God, it takes
or
so
even,
much
you
to
know,
get
the
through
gut
that.
health, you know, your gut health and your brain health.
But I mean everything though, because if you think about the way that, even just, so in my experience being a yoga teacher, people come to class, what is the one bit of the class they're going to skip if they're going to skip? It's the relaxation. And it's the same with the pelvic floor exercises. They're like, okay, cool, I can attach to the lift. I'll just forget about the letting go bit. And then the same in pregnancy. We read everything about pregnancy. We read how to stay fit. We do all our exercise classes. We take the supplements, and we don't prepare for the birth anywhere near as much as that, and then forget about the postnatal part. No one talks about it at all. So we've got this, like, we're able to do, but we're not able to step into that letting go bit. And that relates naturally completely back to how we approach the pelvic floor, because also we can't see it. Like, I mean, you could, but when we're walking around, we relate to what we see, you know, our front body in this. And so we're going, I don't want to get stretch marks, I'll rub all the creams on, and I want to stay fit, and I don't want to get fat in my arms, so I'll do the different things. But we forget, like, this is the base. I mean, this is the fundamental bit down there. And when we think about childbirth, I mean, the things that you talk to women, and what is the fear? Like, what are the fears about childbirth? Usually it's tearing is kind of one of the top ones there. And like, they're looking at babies' heads and they're going, well, how on earth is a baby's head going to come out of me? Like, how is that going to happen?
But when you think about how that was, well, I don't know about you, but when it was introduced to us in school, I mean, we were literally sat there in biology and we were shown a video of this woman screaming her head, you know, and you're seeing this head come out and you're terrified. Like, of course you are. And that kind of education that's given, and hopefully it'll be better in the next generation, but to our, you know, my generation that we're coming up with, that kind of stuff behind you. And I know on my first pregnancy, I found it really hard to digest all the stuff that I had to take on board. I nearly felt like just shying away from it all. I think when it comes to childbirth and pregnancy and everything, personality has a lot to do with it. And it's finding pitching it right for each individual. That's hard, isn't it?
Really
because
hard.
For some of us that can digest all the information, we love it, we can't get enough of it. And then I spoke to a friend the other day, and I was really just not, you know, subtly, you know, I'm a women's health physio now. Have you thought about going for a women's health check? And she fluffed over it, like she couldn't even talk about it.
But this was
the friend. You know, but sometimes it's sometimes easier to talk to strangers, but you have to introduce them to the concept at some level. How else are they going to find out?
She was just like, right.
But this is why.
Apparently on the page is the same. You know, I've had conversations with my groups of friends, and they were like, "You do what?"
That's their own
but
I can understand that maybe if it was men talking about women in that way, because they're like, oh, there's something gross goes on, you know, which is wrong still. But women talking about their own bodies in that way is really interesting.
This is the key thing, and it's why I felt like, when we were looking at lists of topics for this podcast series, for me it was like pelvic floor physio has to be there. Because like in classes, even I find that just saying the word vagina, and you can see everyone they do the thing. They've like gone, oh my God, she's saying vagina. You know, and you're one of people who have used their vaginas to get pregnant. You know, and everyone's examining through the vaginas, and the baby is coming out through the vagina, most likely. You know, so you need to get some kind of a relationship to your vagina.
I'd love to see a study on how many classes in of you saying vagina that they start to relax the vagina and actually like not
let go. I just try and say it like as often as possible.
But that's it, isn't it? It's about normalising.
Normalising so many things.
Absolutely. And
but you see, when you bring it up in class, anything about perineal massage or pelvic floor stuff, you can just see, and most of the class are like, they almost feel sick, like they just can't, the idea of it. And usually when I say, well, why wouldn't you do the perineal stretch massage? They're like, well, okay, so there's a physical barrier when you get to a certain size, you're like, it's actually physically hard to reach your hand around there.
Yeah.
So then you're like, well, cool, then you get your partner involved. And,
Yeah.
you know, partners often feel really left out in pregnancy because the woman's doing all the growing and all the stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a really lovely way that they can get involved and that they can understand the mechanics of what's going to happen. But everyone's like, oh no, gee, I mean, I wouldn't want them going down there.
No, yeah.
Lady,
No.
how did they get in there? I mean, that baby got in there somehow.
I know.
So, but why?
Break that down. Like, sorry, go on, no, you have questions. Go.
No, but why are we able to go, okay, cool, we all have sex, like we've all had sex before, we know when we're sitting with our groups of friends, hopefully everyone's having sex, and that's normal, right? But then when we take it into birth, it's like birth is a medical thing, and then sex is this fun thing, and we find it really hard to make a connection between those two things. And yet when you talk to, like, you read Ina May Gaskin's books, or any of these people, Sheila Kitzinger, any of them, their whole thing is like, in order to create an environment that creates a good birth, you need to be in an environment that you could either take a poo or have sex in. So you need to, like, be relaxed, you need to be not interrupted, you need to not have bright light shined in your face, you need to feel loved. And also, in order to promote that oxytocin, you might be kissing, or you might be playing with nipples, or you might be doing all this kind of stuff. But we're all like, oh, that's so weird, while you're giving birth to your baby, how could you do it?
I wonder, is it a rite of, I nearly wonder, is it a rite of passage that you nearly have to go and have your first baby for some women? In Ireland, maybe it's worldwide approach to this type of thing, but I do think in Ireland we are a little stunted when it comes to
conversations around these things,
you know, history and shame and all these kind of things that kind of have an influence there. And I think, certainly for me, speaking personally, and for patients that I've come across, there are a certain cohort of women that are so in touch with that type of thing. Like, they're so liberal, they're the ones that are there with you. There's the other side of women that will be coming in because they feel this is a tick the box exercise, this is the thing they need to do, because they were told that this is going to lead to them having the ultimate best birth. Find that those women sometimes can be a little bit, they're the high achievers. They want to do everything right. They want to set themselves up to have the best delivery because they were told this is the way it happens. And I don't think that's not as good an approach as you could have either. No. But for me personally speaking, I nearly needed to go over into the other world of being a mother to start to visualise my body as more than a sexual object, as a child maker and giver to the world. That's for me anyway. I needed to have that visual of, and I had friends who were pregnant at the same time, were doing the gentle birth and everything, and I couldn't quite actually get my head around all of that. And I had a C-section first time in the end anyway. So even as a physio, and I hadn't really, again, I started my journey into women's health physio when I had my first child, really and truly. I had tried to curve off into it, but until I got my foot into Milltown, where we have just such an amount of women coming into us, and as a physio, the more cases you see, the more confident, especially with this kind of thing, to have the umbrella and the confidence of the experts like Maeve beside you, that you can not be afraid as a physio even to be there with someone in such an intimate situation, to have the confidence to go, if I'm out of my depth here, I can run this by someone else. And anyway, I know that we've been trained enough to know what we're doing is the best practice. And so I think being able to encourage women to come down that route, it's hard. Like,
it is hard.
And is the language around it, sorry, is it quite medicalised still? And is that the transition that needs to move as well?
I think it's an individual approach as a physio.
Interesting.
I would probably, I have a background of meditation and yoga and that style anyway to my physio approach. Generally, I believe in energy. I've had Reiki. So while I'm not in energy, I believe in energy as well as the medical side. But as a physiotherapist, in order to justify what we do and to qualify why we would want to assess the pelvic floor, there has to be some medical backup behind it. And there is huge amount of medical backup behind it. We know that trauma to the pelvic floor is significantly reduced by perineal massage previous to delivery. But what I want to get across today is knowing that when you're doing your perineal massage, that it's not a 100% guarantee against perineal trauma, and that there is still a high rate of, particularly second degree tears. And if I just demonstrate to you here, usually when you tear, and it's funny, when I'll often see an episiotomy will most likely be on the right hand side.
Okay.
And
is that because of where the colon is?
I think it's because of the surgeon or whoever is applying it will be coming at you this way.
Okay, right.
And they'll be using their right hand.
Oh, no way. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough there.
Because that's what I mainly say. Or it will be centrally if you're going to have an episiotomy. And perineal massage has definitely been proven to show that it reduces the need for episiotomy.
Okay.
And why we don't want episiotomy. I've had an episiotomy. It was very painful. They do say that natural tears heal quicker and better.
Because it tears along a fibre, which is probably weakened to begin with, as opposed to a surgeon's knife saying where it goes.
Yeah, and also you have like jagged edge. If it's like a natural tear, it kind of tears in a jaggedy way. So you've got more surface area that's kind of coming rather than a clean. If you just think of like a graze versus
the stitches will probably be more than what you've had, unless and there is a percentage of women, and again it's less than 6% women that will go on to have maybe a higher degree of tear, which would be a 3rd or a 4th degree tear. And what happens there is that when baby's crowning, the tear will come down towards the anal region here, and that can have impact on continence fecally. But episiotomies can have influence from a continence point of view too.
Isn't it like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when I was training, what I was taught was that with an episiotomy, it's a bit like when you cut with the scissors into a piece of paper, and then if you pull the paper apart, how that line of tear can just travel all the way, like it can go much further than if it tears naturally. If you just take the 2 pieces of paper and tear them, it's probably only going to go a little bit to start with. And I think that there's a risk factor there, right?
And yet it is trying to mesh, and I have seen this debated in certain circles. If you're in a situation as a woman and you're being given choices about whether you want episiotomy, and a lot of women now, they're putting it on their birth premises, I don't want episiotomy. I would encourage women to have an open mind, just even a 5%. If my medical team are encouraging me that this is what I need right now, because they would say that if there is a medical need for it, that they do need to intervene at that time. And I do think, it's about having a little bit of confidence in them without, setting yourself up for the best delivery you can. Ultimately we would prefer that we didn't have a forceps delivery, as there is, higher risk of trauma there. But actually what they're saying now in terms of the best delivery, it's choosing your care provider the best care provider, that when you look at their statistics of how they intervene, that is the best way to reduce
that's interesting. Yeah, makes sense.
Intervention on
Can you look at that? Do you have access to statistics?
AIMS Ireland would have published something a good few years ago now, and it would have shown the different statistics of intervention in the individual hospitals around the country.
Okay, not from individual to individual, but within the hospital culture.
So the percentages of how many episiotomies will be done, how many C-sections. So we know that Holles Street would have the highest rate of C-sections. And and in general though, around the country, you're looking at about a 1/3 of women might have an episiotomy, and a 1/3 of women will have an instrument of some sort, be it vacuum or forceps. And is that a case that we're not preparing women enough? Probably not enough. We're doing our best, but it probably hasn't been uptake, enough.
And is there, so when you're saying there isn't enough of an uptake, are there obstetricians not necessarily endorsing your method, or are they always endorsing it as a case of the mother then is kind of going, I'm not sure?
I think then it's probably twofold. I think there's a certain societal section there of women that are just happy to be going with their doctor still, and now that's changing. And then there are certain obstetricians that mightn't back up the need or the more holistic approach.
Okay.
They don't have time maybe, or they don't prioritise it, but I do think there is a huge amount more coming through now where there is more cohesion.
Right.
I think
historically, in fairness to the obstetricians, they never see anything other than the medicalised births. So there's a fear factor in their approach that's very different than, like, say, a home birth midwife who traditionally will be seeing normal physiological birth and understands how that might take 3 days and how it'll naturally unfold in this kind of gentle way. Usually the person who's getting to the obstetrician, he's going to be present if there is some kind of emergency situation or if it isn't going right. And so then their idea of like this airy-fairy home water birth is like a notion that's like, what? This isn't the birth that I see all the time.
Unfortunately, insurance and they have seen things that maybe can happen and they want to avoid them, and so that has an influence there as well. So it's an adventure for women in many a way, but it's about trying to set women up to have the best possible outcome for them within their circumstance.
It's such an interesting area where, I mean, I don't think as a guy, apart from maybe choices in where I buy a house, what colour my paint is, like, I don't have that many choices to make, which I have to like really make them myself and sit, career choice things, but you don't have kind of like such a really vital set of decisions that all have to, like, every alternative, so what would you like? Like, I can't, it's really making me understand how much responsibility is there in mothering, like how difficult it is to it's like taking on a new career essentially. There's so much to get to know, and like you're living with the body for 20 or 30 years without having to think of it, and then suddenly being required to go, well, would you prefer this or for this, would you prefer this or this, and then having only a certain amount of touch points and reference points and books and friends to actually like
you're so right. That's really insightful, Finn, because I think there's huge pressure on women, and I do think I see women on maybe on the other side, but I did everything, and everything was going so well until this happened, and I did all the stuff, and still maybe I didn't get that perfect delivery I wanted, and yet there are so many other factors at play there.
I do, and I also think that unless you're someone who is living life as a yoga teacher or some kind of person who's fully living all day long in a position where they're being in touch with their bodies and they're required to be in touch with their bodies, most people are walking around not having to be in touch with their bodies. They're living in their heads until they get pregnant, and then suddenly they're still approaching it from a head place, because it's like, what care provider do I have, look at those statistics, analyze, do all these things, and then suddenly that gets to the point of literally the second stage of labor where the baby's descending, and suddenly you're meant to go, and now I open and release. And like, how are you meant to go from this place where you're like head, suddenly into like airy-fairy hippie person? Like, it's a huge jump to go through. And I think we need to, like, as a system, that jump has to be taken like way back before you're pregnant. Like, we all need to get back in touch with being grounded and being more physically aware of our bodies. I mean, most people you say in a class, stand with your feet hip width, and they're thinking, this wide part, this is my hip here, this widest part of my hip. So if that fundamentally isn't understood, then to jump from there into suddenly being pregnant and being able to go like, I know where my pelvic floor is, and this is all going to be, I'm going to be able to relax it. I mean, these things are subtle. And that's why for me, I think it's really important for women to understand what it would look like if they come in here and they're seeing you for an internal. Because when I'm trying to talk to them about it, and I came when I was pregnant, and then I came postnatally as well, and I would be someone obviously who's kind of relaxed about this stuff, and obviously I would talk about vagina and all these areas really easily, but still, like, I don't enjoy going for a smear test, and that holds fear. And for most of us who've ever had a smear test, they're using this cold, probably metal speculum with not enough lubricant on the top of it. Your legs are in this uncomfortable position, and it's really quite sore, especially if you're narrow in there. It's really sore, and it's undignified, and it's kind of horrible. And I think a lot of us hold tension in our pelvic floor and in our vaginas from past traumas, from either sexual experiences or from experiences with doctors and gynecologists from that. And so then when you try to explain to people, actually they're going to be working on you internally and explaining to you how does your pelvic floor work and showing you the tight bits, they're like, what? I'm going to take my clothes off in front of this person, they're going to stick their fingers inside me? No chance. And the reality is, it isn't. it is like that. I mean, the physicality is, yes, that's going to happen, but it's just so much more natural and gentle and holistic, 100% here. And my experience was, you know, Maeve, I came to see Maeve, and she was so warm, so friendly, so relaxed, and it wasn't like I felt really uncomfortable, take off all my clothes, and she turns around and we're all very weird about the fact that I'm naked. It was just like, hey, look, we're both women, this is what's going to be happening. There was loads of lubricant, so there wasn't like, it didn't feel the same way as when you're getting your smear test. It just wasn't painful like that. And it was so informative to have someone actually physically put their hand on a tight spot and show me, well, when you breathed out then, it didn't relax actually. And then, well done, you did it then. And you can feel, because you've got feedback against that muscle, it's so much easier to do it. And maybe you could just run through in brief, like what it would look like for someone to come in and how would that work?
So when somebody comes for their first women's health appointment, they will come into us for an hour. So the thing I like about that is being given the time at the beginning to just build a rapport with someone, you know. And so I would generally spend up to 20 minutes just getting to know somebody, you know, getting to know their history, what's brought them to this point, and just making them feel comfortable and trying to just get a feel of the type of person they are, because the second part is a more kind of, I suppose, intimate assessment. I think once somebody has decided to actually come in, they sometimes are aware of what's ahead of them, and then other times they actually aren't. Because if they haven't asked on the phone, they don't, you know, they might have had an idea, but they're not really sure what's ahead of them. And our ultimate goal is to make somebody feel comfortable. What's about to happen, will always explain why we're doing something, and when they're talking to me, I'm looking for clues as to what it is I'm going to find. And more than any other physio approach, we'll be looking for the issues that might be in there. And then, so when we're embarking on the assessment, I'm letting somebody know, okay, this is how we're going to approach it. I'll often show them the pelvis. And essentially, when we assess somebody internally, we'll be using our finger to palpate the muscles on either side very gently, you know, and like you said, it's not aggressive in any way, and it's informative, because it's like a deep dark cavern in there for so many women. I mean, they find it hard, a lot of us, I'm saying they, but a lot of us find it hard to connect with our external sexual organs, never mind internally. And you know, I've had a pelvic floor assessment, and I couldn't believe, like you said, God, there's my pain, or there's my tightness back there, and I had no awareness of that. And then you leave with this whole other part of you having been opened up, and you're going, gosh, you know, like, okay, I knew my arm moved in and out, and now I have an awareness of a muscle in there that does so much for me. That, you know, now, and deservedly so, that we should give that attention if we, you know, if we want to bring the best out in our bodies. I do believe that anyway. And it seems like an unusual thing to do, but I suppose it's the only way that we have, is the gold standard. We do have options to do ultrasound externally, but from my experience in doing the internal exam, there's something about an internal exam that just brings way more awareness for a woman to that area. And, you know,
I think, sorry, we go in so many things, even when people are asked to close their eyes and touch their nose, you know, that proprioception style thing, which is just like, we're so far off even when we think we're on. Like,
that's it, absolutely. And like you said, often we don't even know where our feet are with relation to our hips, you know, so how would we know what's going on in here? And we keep, you know, all the education is there, and the, you know, the leaflets are given out, you know, do your pelvic floor exercises. They've been shown to not work. So we need to take it to the next level if we'd like to empower women, to educate them. And education is at the root of it all when it comes to healthcare. We know that, you know, you give somebody all the information, and you motivate them, you inspire them to go, oh, right, so you're saying if I do this, this and this, that's going to change. And if we have a benchmark and we can reassess it, then it gives them a goal.
And I think also, you know, when you build a relationship, in pregnancy, okay, so it's giving you that preparation for your birth. But if you do tear, or if you do have prolapse, or if you do have incontinence afterwards, or pain, or any of these things, it gives you a much easier in to come back to that same friendly face afterwards and go, because it's shy making. A lot of the stuff that happens postnatally is stuff that we don't feel comfortable to talk about. Like if you are having incontinence, or sex is really painful, or you're having kind of pulling from where your scar is, or you have cystitis-y type feelings, or there's millions of them, but they're things that we don't want to talk about, and we're really shy.
You know, that's isolated, and so many women come into me entirely isolated and often kind of, you know, dismissed, really, because of, I suppose, lack of resources and maybe not validated in what they're feeling, or what's worse is thinking this is actually the way I should be feeling.
Exactly.
So it's like a very low bar for expectations. Like,
totally.
Expect a fair bit of trauma post this thing. And if you're not better in like a couple of years, we'll then start to
but we need to change that.
How many times have you been told, and have you heard women say, and I remember being told it by my mom and hearing people talk about it when we were little, oh sure, you never jump on a trampoline again after you've given birth. And like everyone, you've heard it 1,000 times, and you just take it in and go, oh, well, that's what happens, because trampoline.
Exactly. But even laughing, you know,
laughing or sneezing or any of these things, and it's just kind of like, oh yeah, well, when you've had a baby, sure that. But even when you think about how that goes in on a deeper level, it's the same thing. Like when we approach our sexual health postnatally, you hear all these things, like when you're pregnant, of like, oh yeah, and everything gets really loose and really flappy, and then the head's going to come out and you're just going to have this massive big vagina, and sex is never going to be the same again. Or if someone has a C-section, well, at least it didn't ruin your vagina. And you're like, well, hang on, how come we're being fed this? And yet loads of people go on to have great sex lives afterwards, and probably better because they've actually learned where is this thing, what is going on here, and having some connection with themselves. But like, we're never going to get to that place of feeling like we can be empowered postnatally, and we can come back into knowing like, well, actually all these different varieties of normal is normal, but how long does it take? And I remember my midwife saying to me, like, it's a year, at least a year, before stuff starts to settle back down again. And that gave me a really good, because I felt I had this expectation of 6 weeks, you know, like we've heard, like, you don't have sex for 6 weeks, which all you hear really is, I can have sex in 6 weeks. And there was no way I was ready to have sex after 6 weeks. I mean, no way. And I had a secondary tear, and it wasn't anything to do with that. It was just like there had been so much trauma there, and I had a great birth. But still, like, to relate to yourself and understand, like, how is sex going to look afterwards, and maybe it's going to look very different in the beginning, but that just like that penetrative sex doesn't have to be the way initially. And I think when you're informed, and when you're getting to know about the pelvic floor, and you're relating to yourself, and maybe you're going away and feeling and touching and understanding, it gives us the capacity to go forwards and go,
absolutely,
now there's possibilities that weren't there.
And the amount of times that women will have had that's one of the reasons they're coming into me. They're going, you know, I had this tear and really terrified of what's, you know, ahead. With I haven't gone there, you know, this kind of thing. But then they can go out afterwards, because we'll have gone through that barrier, and we'll go, oh hey, that actually wasn't sore. For many it won't be. For some people it might be, and it may need a little bit of work. But for many won't be, and that gives them great confidence. And they'll be, as I always say, you might be pleasantly surprised. Actually, it might be, you know, it. But again, these are all validated fears.
Totally.
You know, when you've gone through that and you've come out the other side, and isn't it lovely to be able to come to somebody that you can openly just discuss these things and not feel embarrassed, you know, about all of the, you know, these different symptoms that can crop up that are within normal realms of recovery. You know, and that can cover all types of things. It might be just pain, it might be different sounds coming out of the vagina at times you don't want it, or it like that, it might be leakage, or, you know, and for others it could be, you know, fecal incontinence and things like that. But we need to have safe spaces for women to come to look, you know, to discuss these things. And I think things have come on a lot, you know, even in the 7 years that I had my first baby. Like, I remember desperately trying to talk to my public health care, my nurse, about just having issues with different things, and I really felt dismissed. And I did kind of linger on with things longer than I should have, because really I was kind of lost in the middle of the baby rush and the looking after baby.
Not feeling heard, and also having your own life, getting on, like, and then every now and then you'd be quiet and go like, that thing is still bothering me though.
And then you're
going, what distractions? I'll get on with the other stuff.
That's it.
Yeah.
And I think women end up thinking there's something wrong with them. Why am I the only one that can't be out there having the drinks with the girls and enjoying myself? Or why can't I be the one that's, doing because there are some people that get up and do a 10k run at 6 weeks. But there's I want women to understand there's all levels of normal after having a baby. There's all levels of normal when you're pregnant. Everybody has a different experience of these things, and it's about owning your own experience and getting all the care you need to support you around that. Not giving yourself such a hard time.
Yeah. And also giving yourself that hard time just is going to make your pelvic floor tighter as well. It's just like a full circle thing, isn't it? When we approach birth and motherhood, the letting go, it's kind of the key thread that comes through the whole thing. It's of course, prepare, do your best, get informed, all that stuff, and then go, and now I trust in whatever is coming.
In whatever's coming.
And that's how we have to go. And I feel like this area of physio is so exciting because it gives us a literal physical representation of that.
And I think it's only in its infancy.
Totally.
I think they haven't, like I said at the start, they haven't enough research behind it really just yet. But I hope that it's going to become more normal for women.
And in I know this we're kind of running on now, but in traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurveda, are you aware of I know obviously in yoga practice, internal pelvic floor, I don't know how it's referenced, but I know it's part of the practice. I remember talking about relaxing your jaw, relaxing your pelvic floor, those sorts of things, and those relationships. But is there so are there acupressure points that people can use for relaxing their pelvic floor? Are there other kind of are there other
modalities?
There certainly are, and I'm not a Chinese acupuncturist, but I do know that there have been some, and I mean our Chinese acupuncturist here, Sharon, would have helped me through my pregnancy.
Oh, interesting.
I mean they have a huge influence on blood flow to the uterus, and we use dry needling externally around the pelvis to help with relaxation. There are some of my colleagues that can apply dry needling and use acupuncture points around the pelvic floor itself to help release.
I've only ever drawn it.
But essentially when we are applying a technique to the pelvic floor, our goal is to help release with pressure. Are we influencing meridians? Maybe. You just don't know. But there are points there that are going to help improve baby's position coming into delivery and help to relax you generally.
And ripen the cervix and all of that kind of stuff.
So those kind of things are definitely worth investing in if you need, if you feel that's what you need going into your delivery.
Cool.
Elaine, it's been great.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And obviously this conversation could go on a million years. There's
I'm just starting to really
many questions. We're but if people want to find you, you're on social media. What's your handle?
I'm at Elaine Barry Physio, and I'm on Instagram, and I'm working here in Milltown along with my amazing colleagues, and there's lots of us here. I can't even tell you how many are here at the moment. We're up and running now again after COVID and back into seeing people in person. So
Brilliant.
So if you want to know more about Elaine, go find her on social media, and you do really great videos and little information pieces about pelvic floor, which are really useful. And even just reminders. I mean, they're things that I might have known already, but you kind of forget little bits about, and then I'm reading them again going, oh yeah, I've forgotten about that thing. And that's a really good, and I think it's your stuff is really digestible for people who maybe are only just beginning to explore the pelvic floor as an idea. It's a really nice, so go check out her videos, and also always like and subscribe, please.
Don't forget our sponsors, Musest and Clear Light Saunas. Get yourself an infrared sauna. I'm sure it helps in the birthing process, although I don't have any studies done, but it's got to. And this is our first foray back into physically distanced live podcasting, so hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. Being one-to-one in the room with the guest is always different. We tried this one already kind of virtually, and I would say all of us had a slightly less than connected experience in it, and it was really nice to be able to actually be in the room with you. I got so much from that chat, and so much to learn. It's so nice to have this conversation. I feel like being in a room here as well with women who are discussing this openly is a real it's a treat for a guy, because it's a world that we don't necessarily get access to, and I think it's really important these conversations are had amongst the sexes as well, that everyone begins to kind of feel
Oh, sorry, just I do want to add that when I came to see Maeve when I was pregnant, I saw her twice, and the second time my partner came too, and she taught him how to do the pelvic floor massage on me. So just if partners are interested, or if you're feeling like that's something that you feel uncomfortable doing, or you're a little bit bigger now and you can't do it, you can bring your partner along and they can hear, and that's so useful, because to hear it from, sometimes when you're saying it to your partner yourself, they're just like, but when they hear it from an actual professional, and they can show them and see what's happening, it's really useful, and it's a nice way for the guys.
That happen, and it is really useful, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's an option too.
All right, thank you, Elaine.
Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.